My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 29 years old, a registered nurse at Metro General Hospital, and the mother of a beautiful 18-month-old daughter named Emma. 3 weeks ago, I sat in my living room holding a DNA test envelope in my trembling hands, while my husband, David, paced nervously behind me, and his mother, Patricia, stood by the window with her arms crossed and a smug expression on her face that I will never forget. She had been waiting for this moment for over 2 years, the moment she believed would prove that I had trapped her son, that I was a gold digger, that our daughter was not really his. But what that DNA test revealed was not about me at all. It was not about my daughter's paternity. It exposed a secret my mother-in-law had been hiding for 30 years, a secret so explosive that it would tear apart everything she had built, destroy the perfect image she had carefully crafted, and prove that the person she had been accusing me of being was exactly who she had been all along. Before I tell you what that envelope contained and how Patricia's face went from smug satisfaction to absolute horror in less than 60 seconds, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. I love connecting with you all. Now, let me take you back to where this whole nightmare began, because you need to understand how a mother's love can twist into something dark and possessive, and how sometimes the people who scream the loudest about other sins are the ones hiding the biggest secrets of all. I met David Mitchell on a rainy October evening 5 years ago at a community fundraiser for the children's hospital where I worked. I was not looking for love. Honestly, I was not looking for anything except maybe some decent catering and a chance to support a cause I believed in. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift in the pediatric ward, and my scrubs were wrinkled under my hastily thrown-on dress. David was there with his accounting firm, one of the event sponsors, and he was standing by the dessert table looking absolutely lost. I remember walking up next to him and saying something stupid like, "Do you think anyone would notice if we just took the entire chocolate fountain and left?" He laughed, a genuine warm laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, and said, "I will create a distraction if you grab the strawberries." We spent the next 3 hours talking, and I forgot completely about how tired I was. He was different from anyone I had dated before. He was kind, genuinely kind, not the performative kind that some men do when they are trying to impress you. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. He told me about his job as a senior accountant, but he did it in a way that was self-deprecating and funny rather than boastful. When I mentioned I was putting myself through a graduate nursing program while working full-time, he looked impressed rather than intimidated. That was our beginning, and it was beautiful. For the first 6 months, everything felt easy. David would show up at the hospital after my night shifts with coffee and bagels. I would surprise him at his office with homemade lunch when I knew he had important meetings. We took long walks through the city, went to art museums even though neither of us knew anything about art, and had the kind of conversations that made hours feel like minutes. He told me about growing up as an only child in an upper-middle-class family, how his father Richard owned a successful commercial real estate business, and how his mother, Patricia, had been a stay-at-home mom who devoted her entire life to raising him. There was something in his voice when he talked about his mother, a mixture of love and obligation that I did not quite understand at the time. He described her as protective, involved, caring. What I would later learn was that those words were generous translations for controlling, invasive, and suffocating. I met Patricia for the first time when David and I had been dating for 7 months. He had been putting it off, always finding reasons why the timing was not quite right. His parents were traveling, his mother was not feeling well, they were remodeling the kitchen. I thought he was being overly cautious, maybe a little embarrassed about how serious we were getting so quickly. I was wrong. He was not embarrassed, he was terrified. The dinner was at their home, a large colonial-style house in an exclusive suburb about 40 minutes from the city. I spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times, finally settling on a simple navy dress that I hoped struck the right balance between respectful and not trying too hard. David was quiet during the drive, his hands tight on the steering wheel.
"Are you okay?" I asked him. He forced a smile. "Mom can be a little intense," he said. "Just be yourself. She is going to love you." The moment Patricia opened the door, I knew that was not going to happen. She looked me up and down with an expression that was not quite a smile, more like an assessment. "You must be Sarah," she said, her voice pleasant but her eyes cold. "David has told us so much about you." She stepped aside to let us in, and I noticed she touched David's arm as he passed, a possessive little gesture that lasted just a second too long. The house was immaculate, the kind of place where you are afraid to touch anything. Everything was cream and beige and perfectly arranged. David's father, Richard, was kinder, shaking my hand warmly and asking genuine questions about my work. But Patricia dominated the entire evening. She sat at the head of the table, even though Richard was technically the head of the household, and she directed every conversation. She asked me about my family, and when I mentioned that my parents were both retired teachers living in a modest home across town, I saw something flicker in her eyes. "Oh, how nice," she said in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. "Teaching is such a noble profession, not very lucrative, but noble." David tensed beside me. "Mom?" he said quietly. Patricia smiled at him, that same assessing smile she had given me at the door. "I am just making conversation, sweetheart. Sarah does not mind, do you, Sarah?" I smiled and said I did not mind, even though I absolutely did. The rest of the dinner was more of the same, Patricia asking questions that seemed innocent but had barbs hidden in them. "Where did you go to college, Sarah?" "Oh, a state school. Well, education is education, I suppose. And you are working while doing graduate school? My goodness, that must be exhausting. I do hope you are not too tired to give David the attention he deserves." David tried to redirect conversations, his father tried to lighten the mood, but Patricia was relentless. By the time we left, I felt like I had been through an interrogation rather than a family dinner. In the car, David apologized immediately. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "She was worse than usual. I thought maybe because she knew how important you are to me, she would try harder." I took his hand. "It's okay," I said, even though it was not. "She just needs time to get to know me." But David shook his head. "You do not understand," he said quietly. "She does not want to know you. She wants to find reasons why you are not good enough, because in her mind, no one will ever be good enough for me." I should have listened to those words more carefully. I should have understood what he was really telling me. But I was young and in love and convinced that I could win Patricia over with kindness and patience. I was so incredibly naive. David proposed to me on a snowy December evening exactly 1 year after we met, at the same spot where we had first started talking at that fundraiser. He had arranged for the venue to let us in after hours, and there were candles everywhere, and when he got down on one knee with his grandmother's ring, I cried so hard I could barely say yes. It was perfect. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. We called his parents from the car on the way back to my apartment, both of us giddy and breathless and talking over each other. Richard answered, and we could hear the smile in his voice when David told him the news. "Congratulations, son," he said warmly. "We are so happy for you both." Then we heard Patricia in the background asking what was happening, and there was a moment of muffled conversation before she took the phone. "You proposed," she said flatly. It was not a question. "Yes, Mom," David said, his excitement dimming slightly. "Sarah said yes, we're engaged." Another pause. "Well," she finally said, "this is quite sudden, is it not?" "We have been together a year, Mom. That is not sudden." "I suppose," Patricia said in that cool voice I was beginning to recognize. "I just hope you have thought this through carefully, David. Marriage is a very serious commitment." "We have thought it through, David," David said, his jaw tightening. "We love each other." I am sure you do, Patricia said. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. Congratulations, I suppose. She hung up. David stared at his phone for a long moment before looking at me. Don't let her ruin this, he said, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. This is our night, our moment. But the damage was already done. Patricia had managed to cast a shadow over our happiness with just a few cold sentences. That was her gift, I would learn, the ability to sour joy with perfectly timed words that were just barely acceptable enough that you couldn't call her out without seeming oversensitive.
The next day, Patricia called David and asked to meet with both of us. She wanted to discuss wedding plans, she said. She wanted to be involved. David was hesitant, but I convinced him it was a good sign. Maybe she just needed time to adjust, I said. Maybe now that it is real, she will come around. We met her for lunch at an expensive restaurant in her neighborhood. Patricia was already seated when we arrived, and she had brought a wedding planning binder. I thought we could start making some preliminary decisions, she said, flipping it open to reveal pages of notes and magazine clippings. I have some ideas. For the next hour, Patricia laid out her vision for our wedding. The venue should be the country club where she and Richard were members. The guest list should include at least 300 people, most of whom I had never met. The color scheme should be ivory and gold because that is classic and elegant. I sat there, increasingly uncomfortable as she made decision after decision without asking what David and I actually wanted. Finally, I cleared my throat. Patricia, I appreciate all this planning, but David and I were actually thinking something smaller, more intimate, maybe 80 or 100 people. Patricia's looked at me as if I had suggested we get married in a dumpster. Smaller, she repeated. 80 people? That would barely cover our side of the family and Richard's business associates. What about your family, Sarah? How many people would you invite? I do not have a large family, I admitted. My parents, my brother and his wife, a few aunts and uncles, some close friends. Maybe 30 people total. Patricia's smile was sharp. I see. Well, we certainly cannot have a wedding where the groom's side outnumbers the bride's side 3-1. That would look very strange. People would talk. Mom, David said warningly. What people? Patricia shot back. I'm just being practical, David. Weddings are not just about the two people getting married. They are about families coming together. They are about representing your social standing and professional relationships. This is important. I felt my face getting hot. With all due respect, Patricia, I think our wedding should be about what David and I want, not about impressing business associates. Patricia's expression hardened. With all due respect, Sarah, you may not understand how things work in our social circle. David has a reputation to uphold. His father's business depends on relationships that have been carefully cultivated over decades. This wedding is an opportunity to strengthen those bonds, or to damage them if it is done poorly. David's hand found mine under the table. Mom, he said firmly, Sarah and I will decide what kind of wedding we want. We appreciate your input, but this is our decision. Patricia dabbed her mouth with her napkin, her movements precise and controlled. Of course, she said, it is your wedding. I just hope you do not come to regret cutting corners to save money. We are not cutting corners, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We just want something meaningful and personal, not a production. Patricia's eyes fixed on me, and in that moment I saw real hostility there. A production, she repeated softly. Is that what you think my suggestions are? I am trying to help you avoid embarrassment, Sarah. I am trying to help you fit into a world you clearly do not understand. The table went silent. Richard had been quiet through most of this conversation, but now he cleared his throat. Patricia, that is enough. She turned to him, her expression innocent. What? I'm just being honest. The girl has no experience with events of this caliber. Someone needs to guide her. Her name is Sarah, Richard said quietly, and she is going to be our daughter-in-law. I think we should trust David and Sarah to make their own choices. Patricia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The rest of the lunch was painfully awkward. When we finally left, David was fuming. "I am so sorry," he said for the 100th time. "I do not know what is wrong with her." I took a deep breath. "David, I think your mother has already decided she does not like me. Nothing I do is going to change that." He started to protest, but I continued. "And I need to know right now, are you going to let her control our wedding, our marriage, our lives? Because if you are, we need to figure that out before we go any further." David stopped walking and turned to face me fully. "No," he said, "I am not going to let her control us. You are going to be my wife. You come first, not her." I wanted to believe him, I really did. The wedding planning became a battlefield. Patricia inserted herself into every decision, always under the guise of being helpful. When David and I chose a small historic venue that we loved, Patricia told everyone it was too small and shabby. When I found a wedding dress I adored at a sample sale, Patricia told David's aunts that I was being cheap and that she was embarrassed her son's bride could not afford a proper gown. She volunteered to pay for a designer dress instead, which sounds generous until you understand it was really about control. I politely declined, and she pouted for weeks. She tried to take over the guest list, insisting we invite people I had never met. She criticized my choice of bridesmaids, saying they looked too casual in the dresses I had picked. She even tried to change the menu at our reception, telling the caterer that my selections were too simple and unsophisticated. Every single battle exhausted me. David tried to run interference, but Patricia had decades of practice manipulating him. She would cry and say she just wanted to be involved, that she felt pushed aside, that all she ever wanted was to be a good mother. And David, who loved his mother despite everything, would feel guilty. The worst part was how she operated. She was never outright cruel where others could see. She saved her coldest remarks for private moments. At my bridal shower, which my mother and best friend had organized, Patricia showed up with expensive gifts and played the role of doting future mother-in-law perfectly. But when we were alone in the kitchen for just 2 minutes, she leaned close and whispered, "I hope you know what you are doing, Sarah. Marriage to David comes with expectations. If you cannot meet them, it will destroy him, and I will never forgive you for that." Then she walked back out to the party with a bright smile. These moments made me feel crazy. When I tried to explain them to David, they sounded petty. She said she hopes I know what I am doing. She said marriage has expectations. Repeated back, they sounded almost reasonable. But the venom in her voice, the threatening tone, that could not be conveyed in a retelling. David would assure me his mother meant well, that she was just protective, that things would get better after the wedding once Patricia saw how happy we were. I wanted to believe him, but deep down I was starting to understand a terrible truth. Patricia did not want David to be happy with me. She wanted him to be happy only with her. We got married on a beautiful Saturday in May, and despite all of Patricia's interference, it was a wonderful day. We had our small, intimate wedding at the historic venue we loved, with 90 guests who actually mattered to us. My dress was the sample sale gown that fit me perfectly, and David cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. For one perfect day, I let myself forget about Patricia's cold disapproval and just enjoyed becoming Mrs. Mitchell. But even on our wedding day, Patricia could not help herself. During the reception, she gave a speech that started out lovely, talking about David as a little boy, how proud she was of the man he had become. Then she pivoted. "Marriage is not easy," she said, her eyes finding mine across the room. "It requires sacrifice and understanding. David has always been accustomed to a certain standard of living, a certain way of doing things. I hope his bride understands the responsibility she has taken on." My mother, sitting at the table next to mine, stiffened. My best friend Ashley squeezed my hand under the table, but most of the guests just smiled, probably thinking Patricia was giving normal motherly advice. Only those of us who knew her understood the real message: you are not good enough and you never will be. David was furious when he heard about it later. Several guests mentioned to him that his mother's speech seemed a bit pointed. He confronted her before we left for our honeymoon, and she cried, saying she was misunderstood, that she was only trying to express how much David meant to her, that of course she welcomed me into the family. David wanted to believe her. He always wanted to believe her. Our honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, a trip we had saved for and planned carefully. It was blissful being away from everything, just the two of us exploring Rome and Florence and the Amalfi Coast. We did not talk about Patricia. We barely talked about anything serious. We just existed together, happy and in love and hopeful about our future. But reality was waiting when we got home. We had rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in the city, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The day after we returned, Patricia showed up unannounced with bags of household items she insisted we needed. Better towels, nicer dishes, a set of expensive cookware. Everything came with a comment. "I noticed you registered for these cheap sheets, so I got you proper ones. You cannot start a marriage with discount linens." David tried to be grateful, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. "Mom, you did not need to do all this," he said. "We have everything we need." "Nonsense," Patricia said, already unpacking boxes in our kitchen. "A mother knows what her son needs." Over the next few months, Patricia made it her mission to be involved in every aspect of our lives. She would call David multiple times a day, always with some urgent concern or worry. She would stop by unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key David had given her for emergencies. I would come home from a long shift at the hospital to find her in my kitchen, rearranging my cabinets or reorganizing my pantry. "You had things in such a disorganized way," she would say. "I was just trying to help." When I gently suggested to David that maybe his mother could call before visiting, he agreed it was reasonable. But when he mentioned it to Patricia, she cried and said she felt unwelcome in her own son's home, that she never thought she would be shut out of David's life, that all she wanted was to be a good mother and grandmother someday. "Grandmother," David repeated. "Mom, we are not even thinking about kids yet. We just got married." Patricia's face hardened for just a second before she rearranged it into a sad smile. "Of course," she said. "I just assumed that was part of the plan. Most couples start families within the first year or two, but I suppose Sarah's career is more important." That was another pattern I was starting to notice. Patricia never directly criticized me. She would make observations, ask innocent questions, plant seeds of doubt. "Sarah works such long hours. Do you ever get to have dinner together? Sarah seems so focused on her graduate program. Does she have time for you? Sarah's apartment was so small before you married. She must be relieved to have access to your income now." The real tension started about 8 months into our marriage. I had been feeling tired and nauseous for a few weeks, and when my period was late, I took a pregnancy test. Positive. I was shocked. We had been careful, using protection, but nothing is 100% effective. I sat on the bathroom floor of our apartment, staring at that little plus sign, feeling a mixture of emotions: fear, excitement, worry, joy. This was not planned. We had talked about having kids eventually, but not for a few more years. I wanted to finish my graduate program first. David wanted to make senior partner at his firm. But here it was, happening whether we were ready or not. I told David that night. He was quiet at first, processing, and then he smiled. "A baby," he said softly. "We are going to have a baby. Are you okay with this?" "I am terrified," I admitted, "but also excited. Is that normal?" He pulled me into his arms. "That is completely normal. We are going to figure this out together." We decided to wait until I was past the first trimester to tell our families, but at 10 weeks, I had a severe bleeding episode that sent me to the emergency room in a panic. David called his parents from the hospital waiting room, needing support. They arrived within 30 minutes. Richard immediately hugged me and told me everything would be okay. Patricia stood back, her face unreadable. "The baby is fine," the doctor told us after an ultrasound and examination. "These bleeding episodes can happen. Everything looks healthy. You just need to take it easy for a few days." The relief was overwhelming. David cried. I cried. Richard wiped his eyes. Patricia said nothing. On the drive home, with Richard and Patricia following us in their car to help get me settled,
David kept talking about how grateful he was, how scared he had been, how this experience made him realize how much he already loved this baby. When we got to our apartment, Patricia finally spoke. "So you are keeping it," she said. It was not a question, but it was not quite a statement either. David stared at her. "What? Of course we are keeping the baby. What kind of question is that?" Patricia shrugged delicately. "I just thought, given the circumstances, you might consider your options." "What circumstances?" I said, my voice tight. "You have been married less than a year," Patricia said calmly. "You are still in graduate school, Sarah. David is trying to advance his career. A baby right now seems poorly timed." "Poorly timed?" David repeated, his voice rising. "Mom, this is our child, your grandchild. We are happy about this." Patricia's expression remained neutral. "I am sure you think you are happy now, but the reality of parenthood is very different from the idea of it. Babies are expensive. They are exhausting. They require sacrifice. I just wonder if you have truly thought this through." Richard put a hand on Patricia's arm. "That is enough," he said quietly. "They are adults. This is their decision." Patricia turned to him, her eyes flashing. "I am allowed to have concerns, Richard. I am allowed to want what is best for our son." "And what you think is best," I said, finding my voice, "is for us not to have this baby?" Patricia finally looked me directly. "What I think, Sarah, is that this pregnancy is very convenient for you. You have been married to my son for less than a year, and suddenly you are pregnant? Forgetting to take your birth control, perhaps?" The room went silent. David's face went pale, then red. "What did you just say?" "I did not forget anything," I said, my hands shaking. "We were using protection. These things happen." Patricia smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Of course, these things happen. How fortunate for you." "Get out," David said. His voice was low and dangerous. I have never heard him sound like that. "What?" Patricia looked genuinely surprised. "I said, get out of our home. Now." "David, I am your mother." "I do not care. You just accused my wife of trapping me with a pregnancy. You implied she got pregnant on purpose to secure financial support. That is disgusting, and I will not tolerate it." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "That is not what I meant." "That is exactly what you meant," David said, "and I am done making excuses for you. Get out." Richard took Patricia's arm. "Come on, Patricia. We need to go." Patricia looked at me as they left, and the hatred in her eyes was no longer masked. "This is not over," her expression said. I sat down heavily on the couch, my whole body shaking. David sat next to me and pulled me close. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." But the damage was done. Patricia had said out loud what she had been implying for months. She thought I was a gold digger who had trapped her son. And no matter what happened next, that accusation would hang over our marriage like a dark cloud. Patricia did not apologize. Instead, she launched a subtle campaign to undermine me to everyone in David's family. She never said anything directly accusatory. She was too smart for that. But she would make comments designed to plant doubt. "Sarah and David are having a baby so soon. I suppose some people are just eager to start families. David always said he wanted to wait until he made partner. I guess plans change when other factors are involved. Sarah must be so relieved that David has a good job. Being a single mother would be so difficult, especially with all her student loans." David's aunts and uncles, his cousins, they all started looking at me differently. Some were kind and supportive, but others clearly believed Patricia's insinuations. I could feel the judgment at family gatherings. The pregnancy was difficult. I had severe morning sickness that lasted all day, every day for the first 4 months. I was exhausted from work and school and growing a human being. Patricia used every symptom as evidence that I was not capable of handling motherhood. She is always tired. How is she going to manage night feedings? She cannot keep food down. How is she going to maintain proper nutrition for the baby? She still insists on working those long hospital shifts.
Does she not care about the stress that puts on the baby? David defended me constantly, but it was exhausting for both of us. He was being pulled in two directions, his mother on one side, insisting she just cared about his well-being, his wife on the other side, increasingly isolated and hurt. Patricia started showing up at our apartment even more frequently, always with some excuse. I brought groceries because I know Sarah is too tired to shop. I made dinner because I know Sarah is not feeling well enough to cook. I picked up the nursery furniture you ordered because I know Sarah cannot lift heavy things right now. Every gesture of help was really a criticism in disguise. You cannot take care of yourself, therefore you cannot take care of my son or my grandchild. The worst part was how she made David feel guilty. He would try to set boundaries, and she would cry and say she was just trying to help, that she was so excited to be a grandmother, that she never thought her own son would push her away. She would remind him of everything she had sacrificed raising him as a stay-at-home mother, how her whole life had been devoted to him, how she only wanted to be included in this next chapter. And David, who was fundamentally a good person who loved his mother, would soften. "Maybe I am being too hard on her," he would say. "She's just enthusiastic about the baby." But I could see what was really happening. Patricia was not enthusiastic about the baby. She was terrified of losing control over David. I gave birth to Emma on a humid July morning after 18 hours of labor. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 5 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and David's nose. David cried when they placed her in his arms, and I fell in love with both of them all over again. For a few hours, the world was perfect. Then Patricia arrived at the hospital. She pushed into my room without knocking, still in her tennis clothes, clearly annoyed at having her day interrupted. "Where is she? Let me see my granddaughter." David was holding Emma, and he smiled despite the tension. "Here she is, Mom. Emma Rose Mitchell." Patricia took Emma from David's arms without asking. She examined her like she was inspecting a piece of fruit at the grocery store. "She looks nothing like you, David," Patricia said. "Nothing at all." David laughed. "Mom, she's 3 hours old. Newborns don't look like anyone yet."
Patricia's mouth tightened. "I suppose, but I had expected her to have the Mitchell features. David has very strong genetics." "She looks like me," I said quietly from the bed. "She has my hair, my mouth shape." Patricia did not even glance at me. "We will see," she said. "Babies change so much in the first few months." Over the next days and weeks, Patricia made similar comments constantly. "Are you sure she is going to be tall? The Mitchell family is all tall. Her eyes are still blue. I thought they would be brown like David's by now. She does not smile like David did at this age." Every comment was designed to suggest that Emma was not really David's child, that I had somehow deceived him. It was subtle enough that David did not always catch it, but I heard every single implication. Patricia inserted herself into every aspect of Emma's care. She would show up at our apartment and criticize everything I was doing. "You are holding her wrong. You are feeding her too often. You are not feeding her enough. That is not how I burped David. You should not be letting her sleep so much during the day. You should not be waking her up so much at night." When I tried to politely say that I was following our pediatrician's advice, Patricia would smile tightly and say, "Doctors do not know everything, Sarah. Mothers have instincts, although I suppose not all mothers are naturally maternal." David would intervene when he was home, but he worked long hours, and I was alone with Patricia's criticism most of the time. I started dreading her visits, started pretending I was not home when she knocked, but she had a key and she would let herself in. The breaking point came when Emma was 6 months old. We were at Patricia and Richard's house for Sunday dinner, a weekly obligation that I had been trying to get out of for months. The whole extended family was there, about 20 people. Emma was teething and fussy, and I was exhausted. I had been up most of the night with her, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep.
Patricia had made an elaborate meal, and everyone was gathered around the dining room table. Emma started crying, and I excused myself to go feed her in the guest room. When I came back 20 minutes later, the conversation at the table stopped abruptly. Everyone was looking at Patricia, who had her phone out showing something to David's Aunt Carol. I sat down, settling Emma in my lap, and tried to pretend I had not noticed. "What are you all looking at?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Patricia looked up, and there was something triumphant in her expression. "Oh, just some old photos of David as a baby. I was showing everyone how much he looked like Richard at that age. Strong family genetics." She turned her phone toward me. "See?" The pictures showed David as an infant and another photo of Richard as a baby. They did look similar, both with light brown hair and round faces. "That is nice," I said carefully, not sure where this was going. Patricia's smile sharpened. "Yes, it is remarkable how genetics work, how family traits carry through generations." She paused, looking around the table, making sure everyone was paying attention. "It makes you wonder sometimes when a baby does not have any recognizable family features." The table went silent. Everyone was looking at Emma, then at David, then at me. I felt my face getting hot. "What are you saying, Patricia?" "I am not saying anything," Patricia said innocently. "I am just making an observation. Emma does not look like anyone in the Mitchell family. Not David, not Richard, not any of David's baby photos. It is just interesting, that is all." "Mom," David said, his voice tight with warning, "do not—" "Do not what?" Patricia said. "I am not allowed to notice that my granddaughter looks nothing like my son, that she has none of the Mitchell family traits, that there is absolutely no resemblance whatsoever." Aunt Carol shifted uncomfortably. "Patricia, maybe this is not the right time." "This is exactly the right time," Patricia said, her voice rising. "Everyone has been too polite to say what we are all thinking, but I am not going to pretend anymore." She turned to me, and the mask finally dropped completely. "I know what you did, Sarah. You trapped my son with this pregnancy. You probably weren't even sure if it was his, but you saw an opportunity and you took it." I shot to my feet, clutching Emma. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" Patricia stood as well. "How dare you come into my son's life, manipulate him into marriage, get pregnant suspiciously quickly, and then produce a child who looks nothing like him? You are a liar and a gold digger, and I will not stand by and watch you destroy my son's life." David slammed his hand on the table, making dishes rattle. "That's enough."
Patricia turned to him, her eyes wild. "David, look at her. Really look at your daughter. Does she look anything like you? Anything at all? She looks like a baby, Mom. She looks like a 6-month-old baby. She looks like Sarah got pregnant by someone else and convinced you it was yours," Patricia hissed. "She saw a successful man with money and family connections, and she trapped you." The room erupted. Richard was telling Patricia to calm down. Aunt Carol was trying to gather her things to leave. David's cousin Mark was saying something about DNA tests. I just stood there, shaking, holding my daughter, feeling like my entire world was collapsing. David crossed the room and took Emma from my arms, then handed her to his father. "Dad, take Emma for a minute, please." Richard took the baby gently, his face pale. Then David turned to his mother, and his voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "You want to know if Emma is mine? Fine, we will do a DNA test. We will get the most comprehensive test available, and when the results come back, everyone in this room will see them." Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different approach. "I just want what is best for you, David." "This is what is best for me," David said, "proving my wife right and you wrong." We left the house 5 minutes later, with Richard carrying Emma out to our car. He kissed the baby's forehead before handing her to me. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stopped this sooner. I should have seen what was happening.
"It is not your fault," I said. He nodded but did not look convinced. "The results will take about 2 weeks," he said. "I will make sure Patricia does not contact you until then." "Thank you, Richard." He smiled sadly. "For what it is worth, that little girl looks exactly like David did at 6 months. I have the photo albums to prove it. Patricia just refuses to see it." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. We did not hear from Patricia, but we heard from everyone else. David's family members called with their opinions. Some apologized for Patricia's behavior. Others gently suggested that maybe a DNA test was not a bad idea, just to be sure, which felt like a betrayal in itself. My own parents were horrified. "Your mother-in-law accused you of what?" my mother said on the phone. "In front of the whole family? That woman needs help." My brother offered to come over and provide moral support, which I appreciated but declined. I just wanted to get through the 2 weeks and have proof that would shut Patricia up forever. But there was a small voice in the back of my mind that kept whispering, what if the DNA test reveals something else? What if there is something in David's family history that Patricia does not want exposed? David had taken time off work to be home with me. We barely talked about the incident at first, both of us too raw. But 3 days after the test, he brought it up. "I've been thinking," he said. We were sitting on the couch, Emma asleep between us. What my mother said, the way she reacted when I mentioned the full family panel, she looked scared. I noticed that too. "You don't think," he paused, "you don't think there's something she's hiding, do you?" "I don't know," I said honestly, but her reaction was strange. Why would she care about a family panel if she has nothing to hide? David was quiet for a long moment. "When I was a kid," he said finally, "there were always these weird comments from relatives about how I didn't look like Dad when I was born, how I was unexpected. Mom always shut down those conversations really fast. I never thought much about it."
"Do you look like your father now?" "I do. Everyone says so. But maybe as a baby," he trailed off. "We should not speculate," I said. "We will have the results soon." But I was speculating. I could not stop. The pieces were starting to fit together in a picture I had not expected to see. Patricia's overprotectiveness of David, her immediate hostility toward me, her panic about the family DNA panel, her projection about me trapping David. What if Patricia had done exactly what she accused me of doing? What if she had trapped Richard with a pregnancy? Or worse, what if Emma was not the only child in this family whose paternity was questionable? I started digging. I told David I was doing research for a paper for school, but really I was investigating his family history. I started with old photos. Richard had boxes of them in his study, and one afternoon when we visited so Richard could see Emma, I asked if I could look through them. He seemed pleased that I was interested in family history. "Look at anything you want," he said. Patricia was out, thank God. I spread out photos across Richard's desk, organizing them by date. There were pictures of Richard as a baby and young child, then pictures of him as a teenager and young adult, and then pictures of his wedding to Patricia. I stared at those wedding photos for a long time. Patricia in a beautiful white dress, her belly barely showing but definitely rounded if you looked carefully. Richard looking young and happy, but also somehow anxious. The date on the back of the photo, June 1994. Then I found photos of David as a newborn, March 1995, 9 months after the wedding. So Patricia had not been pregnant at the wedding, or if she was, it was very early. I kept looking. There were photos of Richard's family, his parents, his siblings, and there, tucked in the back of one album, was a photo of a man who looked strikingly like Richard. The resemblance was remarkable. "Brothers?" I asked Richard, who had come into the study. Richard looked at the photo and his expression changed. "That is my younger brother," Richard said quietly. "That is Jonathan. He died in a car accident in 1994. "I am sorry," I said, and I meant it. Richard nodded. He was only 28. It was right before Patricia and I got married, actually. Very difficult time. He took the photo from me and studied it. "You know," he said slowly, "everyone always said David looked more like Jonathan than me when he was born. I thought they were just seeing what they wanted to see because they missed him, but looking at this now, after all these years, the resemblance really is striking." My heart was pounding. Did Jonathan and Patricia know each other well? Richard's face clouded.
They knew each other. Jonathan introduced us, actually. He and Patricia worked at the country club. Why? I scrambled for an excuse. Just curious about family history, making conversation. Richard looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him thinking, processing. Then he carefully put the photo back. The DNA results will be here in a few days, he said. Then we will know everything we need to know. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. David had arranged for the results to be sent to our apartment, not his parents' house. We sat on the couch, staring at it for 10 minutes before either of us moved. "Do you want me to open it?" David asked. "Together," I said. He tore open the envelope and pulled out several pages of dense scientific text and charts. We had paid for the most comprehensive panel available: paternity results, sibling analysis, ancestry breakdown, genetic markers, everything. David found the relevant page first. Probability of paternity, 99.9%, he read. "Emma is definitely mine." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "Of course she is." "I never doubted it," David said, "but the relief is—" He stopped. "Yeah," I said, "I know." He kept flipping through pages. "There's a lot here. Family analysis, genetic relationships, ancestry." He stopped, abruptly. "What?" I leaned over to look. The page was titled Family Relationship Analysis. It showed genetic markers comparing David to Richard and to Patricia. David is reading the numbers, his face going pale. "According to this," he said slowly, "Dad and I share 25% of our DNA, not 50%, 25%. What does that mean?" "That is the amount you share with an uncle," David whispered, "not a father." We stared at each other. "Oh my God," I breathed. David flipped frantically through more pages. There has to be an explanation. Maybe the test is wrong. Maybe— But his hands were shaking as he found another page. This one showed a comparison between David and archived DNA from Jonathan Mitchell. Richard had mentioned that Jonathan had been an organ donor, and his DNA was in a medical database. The results were clear. 50% match. David and Jonathan shared the DNA of parent and child. "Your uncle," I said. "Jonathan was your biological father." David stood up, pacing, running his hands through his hair. "This does not make sense. This cannot be real." But it made perfect sense. It made horrible, perfect sense. Patricia and Jonathan had an affair or a relationship. Patricia got pregnant. Jonathan died in a car accident before she could tell him or before anyone found out. Richard, grief-stricken over his brother's death, married Patricia shortly after. Maybe he never knew she was pregnant. Maybe she convinced him the baby was his. Or maybe he knew and married her anyway to give his brother's child a name. "We need to talk to your father," I said. "We need to understand what happened." David looked at me, his eyes red. "My entire life is a lie." "Your life is not a lie," I said firmly. "Richard raised you. He loved you. He is your father in every way that matters. But biologically, I am not his son. I am his nephew. My uncle, who I never met, was my actual father. And my mother—" David's voice broke. "My mother lied to everyone for 30 years. And then she had the nerve to accuse you of the exact same thing." We called Richard and asked him to come over immediately. We did not tell him why, just that it was urgent. He arrived within 20 minutes, looking worried. "What is wrong? Is Emma okay?" "Emma is fine," David said. "But we got the DNA results." Richard went very still. "And?" "I am your biological nephew," David said bluntly, "not your son. Jonathan was my biological father." The color drained from Richard's face. He sat down heavily. "Oh," he said. "Oh, God." "You knew," I said. It was not a question. Richard closed his eyes. "I suspected," he said quietly. "I always suspected. Jonathan and Patricia had been close, too close, and when he died, Patricia was devastated in a way that seemed like more than just grief over a friend's death. Then 2 months later, she told me she was pregnant, said we had been careless one night when we were both drunk. I wanted to believe her. I was grieving my brother. She was there. It was complicated. "But you married her," David said. "I married her because she was carrying my brother's child," Richard said, opening his eyes and looking directly at David. "I figured it out eventually. The timing, the way she reacted when I mentioned Jonathan around you. I confronted her when you were about 3 years old. She admitted it. They had been having an affair for months before Jonathan died. She had planned to leave him for him. Then he died, and she panicked. "Why did you stay?" David asked. His voice was raw. "Because you were my brother's son," Richard said. "Because I loved Jonathan, and I loved you. By the time I knew the truth, you were mine in every way that mattered. I was not going to abandon you because of Patricia's lies." "Does she know that you know?" "She knows," Richard said. "We have had an understanding for 27 years. She does not talk about Jonathan. I do not talk about the affair. We stay married for your sake. I thought that was best for you." David was crying now. "I am so sorry," Richard said, his own voice breaking. "I am so sorry you found out this way. I should have told you years ago. You are still my son. Biology does not change that." "I know," David said. But his whole world had shifted, and I could see him struggling to process it. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I asked the question we were all thinking. "Does Patricia know about these results yet?" "No," David said. "They were sent only to us." "We need to tell her," Richard said. "She needs to know that her secret is out. And more than that," I said, anger building in my voice, "she needs to apologize. She accused me of trapping David with a pregnancy and questioned Emma's paternity in front of your entire family. She did the exact same thing she accused me of, but she has been lying about it for 30 years. Richard nodded. "You are right. She owes you a massive apology. And she owes me some honesty," David said. His tears had stopped, and now he just looked tired. "I want to hear it from her. I want her to admit what she did." We decided to gather the entire family the following Sunday. Richard called everyone and said there was important family news that needed to be shared. Patricia called David immediately, her voice anxious. "What is this about?" "You will find out Sunday," David said, and hung up. The days leading up to that Sunday were surreal. David was processing a fundamental shift in his identity. I was preparing for the confrontation I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. And Emma, oblivious to the drama, just continued being a perfect happy baby. We arrived at Richard and Patricia's house at noon. The entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the same people who had witnessed Patricia's accusation 2 weeks earlier. Patricia met us at the door. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't been sleeping. "David," she started, "whatever you are going to say, save it for when everyone is here," David said, pushing past her. We gathered in the living room. I held Emma, and David stood next to me, the DNA results in a folder in his hands. Richard stood on David's other side. Patricia sat across from us, looking small and scared. She knew. She had to know what was coming. David cleared his throat. "2 weeks ago," he said, his voice steady, "my mother accused my wife of trapping me with a pregnancy. She questioned whether Emma was really my daughter. She demanded a DNA test, so we did one." Silence in the room. He opened the folder. "The results confirm that Emma is definitely my biological daughter. Probability of paternity 99.9%. Not that there was ever any real doubt." Patricia's face showed a flicker of something. Disappointment, maybe? "But we did not stop there," David continued. "We did a full family DNA panel, comprehensive genetic testing for everyone," his eyes fixed on Patricia. "And we discovered something very interesting." The room was so quiet I could hear Emma breathing. "According to the DNA results," David said, "Richard Mitchell is not my biological father." Patricia gasped. Multiple people in the room gasped. "But Richard's brother, Jonathan, who died in 1994, was my biological father." Patricia was white as a sheet. "David," she whispered. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," David said, his voice hard. "You had an affair with my uncle Jonathan, you got pregnant with me, then Jonathan died and you married Richard, letting him believe I was his son.
You lied to him, to me, to this entire family for 30 years, and then, after hiding your own secret pregnancy that you used to secure a marriage to a man who was not my father, you had the nerve to accuse my wife of doing the same thing. Patricia was crying now. It was not like that. It was exactly like that, I said, speaking for the first time. You got pregnant, probably unplanned. You saw an opportunity, you took it. You trapped Richard with a pregnancy that was not even his. You are guilty of literally everything you accused me of, except my baby actually is David's. Patricia looked around the room desperately, looking for support, but everyone was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Aunt Carol, who had been looking at photos on Patricia's phone that day, looked particularly horrified. "Richard," Patricia turned to him, tell them it was more complicated than that." Richard's face was stone. "It was not more complicated," he said quietly. "You manipulated me. You used my grief over my brother's death. You lied to me for 3 decades. The only reason I stayed was for David, because he was Jonathan's son and I loved my brother. But do not pretend this was anything other than what it was." Patricia collapsed into sobs. "This is not how it was supposed to come out. You were never supposed to know." "Well, we know now," David said. "And you know what the worst part is? The worst part is not even the lie. It is the hypocrisy. You put Sarah through hell. You made her feel like garbage. You questioned her character and her morals in front of everyone. You tried to destroy her reputation and our marriage. And you did it while hiding the fact that you did exactly what you accused her of." Patricia lifted her head. "I was just trying to protect you." "From what?" David's voice rose. "From a woman who loves me? From a woman who has been nothing but loyal and honest? The only person I needed protection from was you." The family meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Some people left immediately, too uncomfortable to stay. Others lingered, wanting to know more details. David's cousin Mark approached me. "I owe you an apology," he said. "At the dinner 2 weeks ago, when Patricia made those accusations, I did not defend you. I should have." "I appreciate that," I said. Aunt Carol hugged me. "I'm so sorry, honey. We all failed you." Patricia's true character was on full display now, and no one could ignore it anymore. She had destroyed her own reputation trying to destroy mine. Richard asked Patricia to leave the house that evening. "I need time," he told her. "I need to figure out what I want to do." Patricia begged, she cried, she promised to change, but Richard was done. "Pack a bag," he said. "Stay with your sister for a while. We'll talk about next steps later." As Patricia left, she looked at me one last time. "This is your fault," she said. "If you had just left David alone, none of this would have happened." "No," I said, "this is your fault. You built your entire life on a lie, and you were so terrified of it coming out that you tried to project it onto me. But lies always come out eventually." Patricia did not respond. She just grabbed her bag and left. David and I drove home in silence, Ella sleeping in her car seat. When we got to our apartment, David finally spoke. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not leaving me when my mother made your life hell, for standing by me even when I did not defend you enough, for being exactly who you are." I took his hand. "We're family," I said. "You, me, Emma. That's what matters." He nodded. "And Dad. He's still my dad, no matter what the DNA says." "Absolutely," I agreed. Richard had earned that title through 30 years of love and sacrifice. Biology was just biology. The fallout was extensive and public. Word spread quickly through David's social circle about what Patricia had done. Her friends at the country club stopped inviting her to events. Family members who had once regularly included her in gatherings now made excuses. She had built her identity around being the perfect wife and mother, and now everyone knew it was a facade. Richard filed for divorce a month later. The proceedings were swift. Patricia tried to claim she deserved a large settlement, that she had devoted her life to Richard and to raising David. But Richard's lawyers pointed out that the marriage was based on fraud. She had trapped him into marriage using a pregnancy that was not his. The settlement was far less generous than Patricia had hoped. She got the minimum required by law and nothing more.
Patricia tried multiple times to contact David. She sent letters, emails, showed up at our apartment. David ignored all of it. "I need space," he told her through his lawyer. "Do not contact me. If and when I am ready to talk, I will reach out to you." Patricia did not handle rejection well. She began posting on social media, vague messages about ungrateful children and poisonous daughters-in-law. She tried to paint herself as the victim, the poor mother who was being punished for past mistakes. But too many people knew the truth. Her attempts to gain sympathy backfired. People commented on her posts calling her out for her hypocrisy. Someone even found old photos from Richard and Patricia's wedding where you could see Patricia's rounded belly, and those photos circulated online. It was brutal, and part of me felt bad for her, but a larger part of me remembered how she had treated me, how she had tried to destroy my marriage and my reputation, how she had done it all while hiding her own much bigger secret. The worst consequences were financial. Patricia had been living off Richard's money for 30 years. She had never worked, never developed job skills, never built her own career. Suddenly, at 58 years old, she was on her own with a modest settlement and no income. She had to sell jewelry. She had to move from her large house into a small apartment. She had to get a job for the first time in decades, ending up doing administrative work at a dental office. It was a stunning fall from grace. Meanwhile, David and I were rebuilding. We went to therapy, both individually and as a couple. David needed to process his identity shift, the revelation about his biological father, the betrayal by his mother. I needed to process the trauma of being accused and gaslit for so long. It was hard work, but it made us stronger. Richard became a fixture in our lives. He was at our apartment several times a week, playing with Emma, helping with household repairs, just being present. "I love that little girl," he told me once, "and I love you and David. You are my family. Patricia's lies do not change that." "What about Patricia?" I asked carefully. "Do you hate her?" Richard thought about it. "No," he said finally. "I do not hate her. I am angry and I feel betrayed, but hate requires too much energy. She made terrible choices based on fear and selfishness. She is paying for those choices now. That is enough for me." 6 months after the DNA revelation, Patricia sent David a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter. David showed it to me before opening it. "Should I read it?" he asked. "That is up to you," I said. He opened it carefully. The letter was 10 pages long, handwritten in Patricia's neat script. David read it silently, his expression changing as he went. "What does it say?" I finally asked. "It is an apology," he said. "A real one, I think. She takes responsibility. She explains what happened with Jonathan, how the affair started, how panicked she was when she found out she was pregnant, and then Jonathan died. She admits she should have told Richard the truth from the beginning. She says she knows she destroyed our trust and our relationship, and she does not expect forgiveness. She just wanted me to know she is sorry." "Are you going to respond?" "Not yet," David said. "Maybe someday, but not yet." That felt right. Forgiveness, if it came, would take time. Meanwhile, Emma was growing and thriving. She started crawling, then pulling herself up on furniture, then taking her first wobbly steps. Each milestone was celebrated by me, David, and Richard. Patricia was not there for any of it. Sometimes I wondered if she knew what she was missing, if she understood that her lies had cost her not just her marriage and her reputation, but her relationship with her son and granddaughter. When Emma was 18 months old, we had a small party for her birthday, just close family and friends. Richard was there, of course, my parents, my brother, David's Aunt Carol, and a few cousins who had supported us. It was intimate and joyful, everything Patricia's forced family gatherings had never been. As I watched Emma smash her face into her birthday cake, David's arm around my waist, Richard taking photos and laughing, I realized something. We had built something real here, a family based on honesty and love and chosen commitment, not obligation or lies. Patricia had tried to destroy it because she was afraid her own lies would be exposed, but in trying to tear us apart, she had only made us stronger. That night, after everyone left and Emma was asleep, I found David standing in the nursery doorway watching our daughter sleep. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. I was just thinking about how different things could have been if you had believed my mother's implications, if you had left me, if we had not done that DNA test. But we did do the test, I said, and the truth came out, and we are still here. He pulled me close. I love you, he said. I love you for standing your ground when I should have been standing with you, for being patient while I figured things out, for giving Emma a mother who has integrity and strength. I love you too, I said. And we stood there, together, watching our daughter sleep, survivors of a storm we had not created but had weathered together. If you have made it this far, I want to leave you with something. Not advice, because I am not qualified to tell anyone how to live their life, but maybe a reflection, a lesson I learned the hard way. When someone accuses you loudly and persistently of something specific, pay attention, because often that accusation is a mirror. They are projecting their own sins, their own secrets, their own guilt onto you. Patricia accused me of trapping David with a pregnancy because that's exactly what she had done to Richard. She questioned Emma's paternity because she knew David's paternity was questionable. She called me a gold digger because she had married Richard for financial security after her actual love interest died. Every accusation was a confession, and when I stood firm in my truth, when I insisted on transparency and proof, her house of cards collapsed. The DNA test she demanded to humiliate me ended up exposing her instead. There's something poetic about that, about how the truth always finds a way to surface no matter how deeply it's buried. If you're dealing with someone who constantly accuses you of things you haven't done, someone who projects their worst qualities onto you, hold on to your truth. Don't let their manipulation make you doubt yourself. Don't let their lies become your burden. Stand firm. Demand evidence. Insist on transparency, because light is the best disinfectant and truth is the best defense. My relationship with Patricia will probably never be fully repaired. Maybe someday we'll have some sort of cordial distance, but the damage is too deep for real closeness. And I'm okay with that, because I have David, Emma, Richard, and a chosen family of people who see me clearly and love me anyway. That is enough. To anyone out there being falsely accused, being gaslit, being told you are something you are not, hold on to your truth. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to demand proof, because sometimes the only way to clear your name is to shine a light so bright that every shadow is exposed. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with someone who projected their own issues onto you? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, stories about standing up for yourself and exposing hypocrisy, check out the video in the description. Until next time, remember that your truth is powerful. Hold on to it, defend it, and never let anyone convince you that their lies are more important than your reality. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.